You love your husband, but it is exhausting trying to figure out why you don't want sex and how to fix it. You've probably tried everything: going to the doctor, having a glass of wine, trying to wear lingerie, spicing it up, scheduling it, or maybe even just doing it for the sake of your relationship. I've helped thousands of women with this over the last decade, and here's what I know. The real reason why you don't want sex is not about your libido. And once you start to see what it actually is, everything will start to make sense. And I know this because I spent years trying to fix myself too. And what I found, and what I now teach to others, is that there was nothing wrong with us in the first place. But I know that it is so confusing when you have been told your whole life that you are the problem. So I'm going to start with the most critical element that most marriage therapists never talk about. It's hard to want sex when you don't feel safe to say no. We're somewhat used to hearing people talk about consent and safety when it comes to dating, but when it comes to marriage and committed relationships, we don't hear about it. There's an odd, unspoken rule that when you get married, your bodies belong to each other, and it's kind of like you're each other's property. Boundaries are considered the opposite of intimacy, and you should be thrilled to have your husband look, touch, or comment on your body anytime that he pleases. But here's the thing: you still have bodily autonomy, even though you have committed to each other. It is your basic human right to have a say in how your body is looked at, touched, and commented on. If listening to me talk about this makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable, kind of like, it's really basic, but at the same time, you cannot imagine talking to your husband about this, you are absolutely not alone. I have spoken to tens of thousands of women who are all in loving marriages, but would really struggle to share their likes and especially their dislikes with their partners. Women who quickly change in the closet before their partners can stare at them, don't bend over when their husbands are around for fear of an unwanted butt slap, and endure phrases that make them cringe, like sexy, or hey, hot mama, or hey, your butt looks good in those jeans. Sarah was struggling with this when I started working with her. Her husband liked a couple of things that just absolutely made her skin crawl. One of them was sucking on her earlobe. The slurping sounds and the wet saliva just did not do it for her. In fact, they repulsed her. But every time things got a little bit passionate, his mouth would wander over to the side of her head and it would start over again. She tried to enjoy it, telling herself that this is what making out is about. This is what sex looks like. But soon she started to avoid kissing him, and then pretty soon after, just any physical touch. It took a lot of courage for Sarah to express her dislike of the earlobe suck, because she knew her husband really enjoyed it and she didn't want to hurt his feelings. When she'd brought up things in the past, he'd gotten defensive and grilled her on why she didn't like it. Once I taught her the skill of sharing her dislikes, then she had the freedom to explore and discover and share what she actually wanted. Learning how to say no to things that you do not enjoy is not easy. You have to overcome hardwired messages that women are supposed to be easy to please and agreeable and always say yes. Like Sarah, you may not want to hurt his feelings or create some tension between you, so you just stay silent, which is why I've created a resource just for this. Simple scripts for common scenarios that you may have to create requests around or set boundaries around, even if he gets defensive or shuts down. To get the No Guilt No guide, go to jannadentonhowes.com/no-guilt-no, or find the link in the description. Part of the reason why saying no feels so hard is a belief hidden right in the title of this video. So let's set the record straight. Wanting sex or not wanting it has nothing to do with love. My own research, as well as findings from researchers like Dr. Lori Brotto or Dr. Rosemary Bassan, show that sex has less to do with love and more to do with cultural messages, relationship dynamics, and expectations and previous sexual experiences. The myth that love naturally leads to sex comes from a variety of places. First off, the media. Watch any rom-com and you will see the same formula. Meet, fall in love, have amazing sex, and live happily ever after. But of course, what we aren't seeing is real life. And in real life, people actually have sex for a variety of reasons, including wanting to be accepted, pressure, fear of consequences, a sense of duty, a physical desire for orgasm. Secondly, popular marriage advice often equates a healthy marriage with a frequent sex life. Not a healthy sex life, which is what I'm advocating for, but the number of times you have sex in a given period. So frequency becomes the proof that there's love and that the marriage is healthy. And on the flip side, if you aren't having sex regularly, then that must mean that there is something wrong with your relationship. But here's the truth. There are many couples, you may be surprised to know, that have mutually agreed to not have sex, and they are doing just fine. And they love each other, and they still have a healthy, caring relationship. So the fact that you don't want sex with your husband right now does not mean that you don't love him. But if that's true, and it's not because there's something wrong with you, then what's actually impacting your desire? In my experience, the biggest killer of desire is pressure. And that's what's actually happening when you equate sex with love. It's so much pressure because now you don't just have a boring libido issue. Now you don't love him. You may have even heard your husband say something like, well, if you loved me, then you'd want to have sex with me. It's painful and frustrating because you know that's not it. But the pressure, it just makes things way worse. Jane had only been married 5 years when she came to my program. Her and her husband had wanted to wait to have sex until they got married because of their religious commitment, but they had done almost everything else except intercourse by the time they said I do. Jane told me that in her year and a half of dating, she was very sexually adventurous and fully expected them to have a very active sex life once they got married. After the wedding, they had a couple of weeks of what was expected. Lots of frequent, fun, playful experiences until one night her husband called her up for bed and she felt a pit of dread in her stomach. That dread quickly developed into full-blown anxiety anytime her husband would initiate any physical contact. And she spent the next couple of years going from therapist to doctor to reading books to buying magic libido pills online to try to figure out what was going on with her. What happened to Jane happens to so many women, and I call it the marriage sex contract. What was once carefree exploration, curiosity, play, now has become something that is an obligation and a duty and something she has to provide. And in Jane's experience, her husband had never come out and said, you owe me sex, but it was in the air. Neither of them entered the marriage without a script. They inherited ideas about what a husband needs, what a wife should provide, and what a healthy marriage should look like. And very quickly, those unspoken expectations created an environment in which sex felt less like a choice and more like a chore. So you see how pressure, whether coming directly or indirectly through cultural conditioning, can decrease your desire dramatically. Now that you understand the reason you don't want to have sex with your husband isn't about your libido, it's about your environment, you need to know how to communicate this to him because otherwise, nothing is going to change. I'll show you exactly how to have this conversation in the next video. How do I tell my husband I don't want sex without hurting him? I'll see you there.